Guys, thanks for joining me. I've got a really cool video I want to share with you tonight. So I want to talk with you about the theory, the double slit experiment, and a different consideration in regard to what is causing it to take place, the results that we seem to get from the double slit experiment. And I want to show you, this is completely new, nothing I've ever seen before, but I think it's worth considering. And I'm going to give you the math on how to check it. I've already done a quick check. So far it seems to check under my calculations, but I'd like a really good mathematician to run the check to see what they come up with. Okay, so I'm going to skip a lot of things. I'm going to jump right to the main point, and that is this right here is an atom. I want you to consider that there's a light source that, say, is going off in this direction towards the two slits. And even though that light source might be big, really big, you know, this atom is basically enlarged right now, so we can see what one atom would be doing. And consider that the atoms are all vibrating in sync. Now, this theory on light is different. We'll explain the double slit experiment in a different way, but this is what I'd like to propose. Let's pretend this single atom moving in unison with the other atoms is vibrating out and in. The shell is vibrating out and in. So this right here is the atom. Here is the outermost point of the atom's vibration. Here is the innermost point of the atom's vibration. And what I'd like to consider here is that when the atom is at its furthest expansion, it's no longer moving. There's 2 points at which the atom is not moving. Its furthest expansion and its furthest contraction. And what I'd like to suggest is that the eye will not see the atom at this point and at this point. And that these 2 points where the atom is not moving, these points would actually coincide with the black bands on the wall. So how would that take place? First of all, you would have to back up and see the force of light information, because this is a completely different paradigm on how matter and light works. But I'm going to throw it out, and then the mathematicians can do the calculations. You can do the calculations, and my calculations are not kicking this to the curb yet. That's why I'd like a really good mathematician to do the math on it, because if the math adds up, it could be that it's really pointing to a new explanation for this double slit experiment. So what's taking place here, the theory is this: no particles, no waves are moving through the vacuum of space. But through this vacuum, we have the 2 slits at the other side. And so what would take place is, as this atom expands and contracts, it causes the matter at the other side on the wall to also try to move at one with it. So as this atom vibrates, it causes the atoms in the wall to want to vibrate. So the first line of atoms, the closest atoms to this atom through the slit, there would be a line of those atoms that would come to motion first. And think about then the next slit, the same thing. There would be a line, right? Because that would be the line of atoms that are closest to this atom. So they would begin to vibrate first. Then the atoms right to the side of that first row would vibrate next, right beside it next. And this would take place along the wall. So from one slit, it would go in one direction, from the other slit, the other direction. Now, if you could slow it down and watch it really closely, what I'm proposing is that the outer expansion of the atom is the red. The middle line is the blue. I actually reversed this to where this is probably too much thought into this one. The original one is the one I cling to. I think it has more logic to it. And that would be that the outer band is the red, the inner is the green, and the closest, tightest is actually the blue. I feel stronger about that, but this was kind of another version. But either way, you can still test it with the math, and I'll show you how in a moment. So as these patterns go along the wall, they would actually still make the same pattern as we would see in the double slit experiment. However, this is how we can test the math on this to see if this is a logical explanation. The atoms vibrate so many times per second, and the light travels at a certain amount of speed, obviously per second. And what my first mathematical calculations was basically a calculation saying, okay, if the atoms are vibrating this fast, And these patterns are moving along the wall in both directions. And every time you get to the outer expansion or the inner expansion, you get a black band. Where they overlap on the wall is where you're going to get the interference pattern. So what I'm saying is causing the interference pattern is actually these points where the atom is expanded and the atom has contracted, doing the same thing to the matter on the wall. So how can you test it mathematically? Basically, you can do the calculation of how far an atom, how fast the atoms move, and then the black bands should correspond with these points. So you have to calculate it based on how far this pattern is on the wall before you get the black bands, because the black bands again will be the overlapping of these bands coming through the two slits, forming these bands on the wall. And so every single contraction of the atom is going to, at the speed of light, send out a certain distance before you see the black bands. So I'd like to reiterate, my first calculations did not kick this theory out of the park. I would like to have a really good mathematician, or more than one, do these tests. If you could rerun them and see these distances of where these black bands are, and again, if these atoms, you can look up on tables how fast these atoms are vibrating. And then you can also look at the speed of light, and you can determine how long this distance should be on these walls before you see these black bands. Okay, so that is a new theory for the double slit experiment. Thanks for listening tonight. If you're a mathematician and you run these tests, and let me know what your math comes back at. Let me know, does it break this? Does this, like I said, with mine worked out? If you do the fine details, let me know, does it work out for you guys? So that's a way to do a mathematical test on a new theory for the double slit experiment, what would be causing those black bands. Guys, thanks a lot for joining me. Hope you have a great night. Out of here. Ow!